So to start, I want to share a story with you because, we got together as a team, and Jose mentioned that idea about putting the pieces of the puzzle together. And it wasn't the first time that I'd heard that. I have worked with hundreds of people over the last decade, and a lot of what I hear is that I've put puzzle pieces together. And so that kind of got me thinking, and I called my mother last night, and I said, Mom, I said, I remember I used to put puzzles together. I said, can you tell me the story? Like, how did this all happen? She said, yeah, it was a very curious thing. I was at a yard sale, and I saw a puzzle for about 30 pieces, and I bought it for you. And I got on the ground when we got home. I showed you how to put a couple pieces together, and then I got distracted, and I came back, and you had the whole puzzle together. And I just thought, as your mother, it was like a very curious thing. And so then the next time I went to the store, I got you a bigger puzzle. Still big pieces, but, in a short time, you put it together. And within more time, it was 100 pieces, and just continue to get bigger. And this was sort of like my first video game, if you will. At that time, Nintendo hadn't come out, and I was just enamored with puzzles. And she said, but the one that astonished us all in the family was when we got you a 1,000-piece puzzle. And, it took you a few days, but you put that thing together. And she said, those pieces were so small. And she said, and I came back, after a few days, and you had put it all together. In the family where you're 5 years old and you had put this entire puzzle together, we were shocked. We taped it up and we kept it together for a while. She's like, do you remember? I said, no, I don't. But that I wanted to share that with you because, it's very a curious thing. Sometimes we go through life and things are happening on our journey and we just kind of think that they just are. But there's always very real significance. And I think as Jose mentioned, what I'm going to attempt to do today is to really put the pieces of the puzzle together for you. And the puzzle really is about life and essentially this reality and the mechanics of consciousness. And I think you'll be very intrigued with it. And I'm going to do it as it relates to my own story. So, I share this from time to time, but I'm very privileged in the sense that when I was 13, I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs. My uncle and my father are great entrepreneurs. They handed me my first book, specifically my uncle. It said, How to Win Customers for Life. And he engraved in it, the more you learn, the more you will earn. Love, your Theo. Right? That was the first book. And as a 13-year-old, young child, I was enamored. And I just started to read everything that I could. He had this great library in his house. He was a great entrepreneur. He had this great library in his house and literally had pretty much every business book at that time that you could find in the business book section. And I just started to read everything that I could about McDonald's and Microsoft and Hewlett-Packard and all sorts of books. And I just became enamored with that kind of stuff. And so he told me that all great leaders, they read, 6 to 8 books a month. And so I just soaked up everything that I could. And so when I graduated and got a degree in economics, I had read hundreds of books. And at that time, I immediately dove into the family business. My father and uncle owned restaurant business with hundreds of employees, and I dove in. Within a short time, I found somebody in the mortgage industry. He showed me a check for $4,000. It was a commission check. And I asked him, I said, well, what is this? And he says, that's a commission check. I said, well, how long did this take? How many can you do? And he's like, yeah, you can do as many as you possibly can in a month. I said, whoa, wait, come again? And he says, yeah, you can do as many as you want. And I said, wow. And so he introduced me to his broker, and the broker told me this. He says, if you work an honest 40 hours in this industry, an honest 40 hours, you will never make less than $100,000. And I thought to myself, wow, I'm making like $3,300 a month working like 80 hours for my dad. I said, I think this is a good deal. So I dove in. I also inherently knew that I had to sort of carve out my own path, my own destiny. And so I jumped in the mortgage industry, and given that I was fluent in economics, I was financially literate, I'm a big systems guy, I spoke Spanish, I served tables all through college, it was like a shoo-in. I immediately started to do well. And because of the fact that I understood business, immediately as I was closing transactions and making commission checks, I was reinvesting it into the business. I was marketing and doing all sorts of stuff. So within a short time, about a year and a half of being in the industry, I ended up opening my own office. And I decided I wanted to do things a little bit different. And so with the partner and I, we just continued to work really, really hard. And within a short time, we had almost 100 employees, 4 different offices through Southern California, and we were doing amazing. Obviously, at that time, in my own awareness, I wanted to get the big houses, the big cars, the big vacations. That was because everything that I read in that business book section sort of attested to the fact that the more success that you have, you're going to be happy. And so I just started, I was like a hyper consumer. I just would consume everything that I could, and I wanted to make sure that I got all those things. And then life threw its very first curveball at me. I'm diagnosed with a stage 3 cancer at 2006, right at the beginning of 2006. And I remember very clearly, I'm in my office, I get the phone call. My general practitioner, he says, hey, yeah, it's cancer. It's level 2 at least, stage 2, but we got to bring you back in for more tests because it could have already gone to your lungs and possibly to your brain, maybe stage 4. I hang up the phone, and this is my reaction. Kobe Bryant was a hero of mine. And I remember watching him growing up, and he would always do those fist bumps, those fist bumps. And the reason I did that was because I understood inherently that all great business people, all great leaders on the earth had to face adversity. And I really didn't feel like I'd faced any great adversity. And I thought, okay, this is my moment. And I'm going to face it willingly. I'm going to embrace it. By the grace of God, I came through that. Now we're in 2007, and I'm on top of the grenade practically that sinks the whole world in the Great Recession. It goes off in the mortgage industry, and I'm on top of that thing, and all of a sudden, I had to file a multi-million-dollar business bankruptcy. And then a year later, the third event, the divorce, right? And that's the one that really sort of broke my back, if you will. Because what that really entailed was those are the great life awakeners. And anytime you face death of any kind, that's a reshifting and a breaking of paradigms. Losing all your money is survival. Losing the most significant relationship, being actually in danger with losing your own life. These are portals of death, and death always equates to transformation. And so one of the big defining moments, I remember my ex-wife at the time, she says, you were just not really here. You were here, but you weren't really here. You were like in your mind all the time, because I was dead set on just getting to the top of the hierarchy. One of the great strengths that I have, my uncle taught me this very early on, was discipline. And I always tell my sons the same thing. It's like, if your father teaches you anything, it's discipline. To be a disciple, right? To be a disciple of your own greatness. And my uncle taught me that. So when I applied all that discipline, man, it worked. The thing just started to yield, but I really wasn't here. I was here. And so all of a sudden, I'm in a really dark place after these great life awakeners. And I remember then going into the University of Santa Monica. And at the University of Santa Monica, I'll never forget what they shared. The teacher said, your outer experience is a reflection of your inner reality. Your outer experience is a reflection of your inner reality. And when I heard that, it was literally like a tuning fork that went off. I was still in the mortgage industry. I was still pretty dang good at doing mortgage, and yet the world was not responding to me anymore. Meaning I would do 0 loans, 1, 2, 0, 1. I was yo-yoing up and down. And the reason that I was yo-yoing up and down, I knew in that moment why. When they said that my outer experience was a reflection of my inner reality, it was like, well, it's because I feel like a failure. I was smiling. I was doing everything I was supposed to do. I was doing my gratitudes, your affirmations, but it just wasn't working because down deep inside, I felt a tremendous amount of shame. I lost everything, millions of dollars, broke my family, and all of a sudden, it's like the world was responding. But just like Jose said, once I understood the mechanics of actually how to heal at a soul level, I got to work. And it was the most amazing thing because as I began to heal, all of a sudden my business started to accelerate. I started to address my shame, my trauma, and very early on I dealt with the divorce, obviously. Then I grieved my own illness. I went through the process of going through all those different things. I embraced those emotions. And through that, my business started to respond. And that's when I knew that business is a game of consciousness. Business is a game of consciousness. Your greater expression of your life, of your business, has everything to do with how expanded your consciousness is. And that's a big piece of the puzzle. The reason that you're not able to do those things that you inherently feel, because I've talked to hundreds of people, everyone feels the greatness, that they can do it, and yet they're just locked out. Why is it that you get locked out? This, I think, kind of speaks to it a bit. And so all that to say that after I started, applying that technique, immediately I was able to get to greater heights. I established the Mortgage Phoenix Group, which some of you guys know. The Mortgage Phoenix Group is really the first violet organization on the planet. I'll talk a lot about that at some other time. But essentially, it's about bringing philanthropy and business into union. What we are all trying to do, which no one ever told us, is that we're trying to bring union between the two poles that are in us. Every single one of us has light and dark, masculine and feminine. And you have to bring those into union. If you do not, you will never experience the peace beyond human understanding. That peace that they speak to in the Bible is only available to us when when those energies stop being at war, when you stop judging yourself, when you stop feeling guilt. All of that shit essentially has to be embraced. It has to be loved. That was part of the grand design. You incarnated, you're a soul, you were given the light of God as a spirit, but you were also given a wound and your own sort of thing that you have to move through. And it was perfect. It was the perfect design. Once you embrace those things, all of that darkness will turn into a river of honey. And it will become beautiful, and you will realize and be humbled, and all you will say is, thank you, God. Thank you. It's a great treasure to be human and to open our hearts. So what happened that first 7-8 years of my entrepreneurial world? I was in the bottom rung. Essentially, who's here seen The Matrix? Okay, the documentary, right? That movie somehow spoke to so many of us. There was some resonance in that movie, and we just couldn't really language it. But ultimately, one of the big takeaways that Morpheus told Neo, he says, you can't feel it, you can't taste it, you can't see it. It's a construct. And what it is, it's a vibrational matrix. It's a vibrational construct that essentially we permeate based on when we come into the earth, we're given frameworks. Here's the religion, here's the science, here's this, here's that. And essentially, this is how we see reality. And they're very disempowering frameworks that keep us here, that keep us in the shame and the guilt and the fear, the news blasting us. And essentially, we are keeping ourselves in that vibrational fear frequency cage. And you just don't know it. You don't even know you're in that. And so what we wanted to demonstrate to you today is about getting you into that flow state. That's why a lot of you experience those emotions. A lot of that was coming up because you're literally expanding in consciousness and you're moving your way through pockets of emotion that are stored in the body. The body stores everything, everything. Most people that I begin to work with, one of the things that everyone wants to do is they immediately want to get very healthy in their bodies. They want to lose weight. And 9 times out of 10, the emotions are the weight you're carrying. It's energetic weight. Essentially, it's stuff you haven't been able to digest, and it literally stays in the body. Once you start to go and have courage, which is that level there, and you start to go into these realms, you start to undo those things, and all of a sudden, the energetic weight comes in. The first 7 years, though, And what Dr. Hawkins speaks about is that 85% of humans are caught in that vibrational reality. And you can feel it and you can see it more than ever right now. You can be in a total state of prosperity and be next to somebody who is just constricted, just scared, you know? And essentially the game that humanity is playing is to go and restore ourselves back into grace, into the higher states, the inherent states, the states before we fell from grace. 8% of the population essentially resides in this top part. The more of us begin to do this great work, is what we call it at Giving Business Soul. It's the great work. I believe that work and energy spent outside of doing this great work is really inefficient use of energy. Because you'll begin to realize that the only way to definitely change everything in your life is to evolve at a conscious level. When you begin to evolve, everything shifts. Your relationships, your business, your finances, all of it shifts. The second 7 years or the last 10 years that I've been applying this, you know, this is ultimately what led me to where I am today. And I remember very clearly, it was like 2016, around November, December. And I remember I used to walk around with a hole in my heart, a void. I don't know if you guys all know that void, or at least can be honest about it. But that void used to drive me to drink, to, you know, essentially addictions of all kinds. Because I was like, damn it, why doesn't this thing fill up? I got this level of business, I got this car, I got this house, I got this relationship, and it just would not fill up. And I remember the day that it did, I woke up and I was shocked. Literally, I was like, oh my God. Literally, como se rellenó, it filled. And it was like, oh my gosh. And that's when I knew that I had touched the elusive elixir of fulfillment. We all are striving for it, and what we've been told as entrepreneurs, it's this way, go as fast as you can, sleep as little as you can, and just get to the top as quickly as you're going to do it, and you're going to feel it. And it's bullshit. It's complete and utter bullshit, and it's kept the human race moving in the wrong direction. And what I want to propose to you is that when we work from the inside out, we will not only have fulfillment, but we will finally know our purpose. Purpose comes when you start to reconcile all of that drama and all of that trauma. And what I can tell you also is that essentially your own evolution is woven within your own drama. The drama in your life actually contains the codes of your transformation. So instead of resisting it, you start to get curious. Start to embrace those things. And so what I want to demonstrate to you is really ultimately how you can do that, because this is where it's at. The thing that we showed you today, the flow state, right? What we're giving you a clue of how to do is the flow hack, to move wherever you are in consciousness and get yourself to that space so you can perform well in the day. But guess what happens the next day? You drop, because your state is your state. And so what I want to demonstrate to you now is an emotional technology, a soul technology, where you can begin to address those dramas and those traumas and their wounds. Because once you grab a wound and you inherit it and you embrace it, it's like a rung of a ladder. And all of a sudden you move to higher ground. Who wants to move to higher ground? All of us do. We want to restore ourselves. So what I want to demonstrate to you are the frameworks necessary to begin to do this. So what you're seeing here is the mechanics of consciousness. Important. Look through it in your workbook. Right now, there's a big movement about the wake up. There's psychedelics. There's all sorts of movements around doing plant medicines. And what that does, it essentially teaches us or essentially breaks us out of the physical reality to give us an understanding that there is much more to this existence than just the physical. And all of a sudden we wake up and it's like, oh my gosh, there's this amazing energy, this source, this connectivity. It's all love, it's all light. And that's wonderful. But that's one part of the equation. What we want to talk about today is really the cleanup phase. The first part is the wake up. You have to realize that there's a greater existence at play. But in order for you to sustain love, To sustain light, you got to go down to clean up. You got to go into the darkness, right? I always love referencing this, but once I understood spiritual psychology, I started to study all the mystical tradition, Buddhism, Islam, Christianity, Egypt, all sorts of stuff. And what I began to realize, and I come back to the Jesus and Yeshua story. Think about this, okay? In the story of the resurrection, right? It says that Jesus descended into hell on the first night, and then he rises into the heavens on the third day, okay? What people do not ever bother to ask is the question of why did he go to hell first? That's the archetypical key. That's the key. You cannot go into great heights without going down into great depths. You must descend to ascend. Flat out, there's no other way. If you continue to focus on the light, you're going to be a disembodied, love and light, super spiritual, but you're not going to be able to integrate it. You're not going to be able to move people in the world. The people that move people in the world are the ones that are fully integrated by going down into the depths of their own darkness. That's where the light is. And that's essentially what I like to say. The greatest trick the devil ever played on humanity was to make us believe that God was outside of ourselves. So go, hey, he's in a cloud, and he's going to come back to you. Get on your knees. Everything's going to be great. That was the greatest trick they ever played, because what did Jesus say? He says, it's right here. It's right here, right? So the cleanup phase, how does it really work? What I want to demonstrate to you are the 7 years of developmental cycles. Remember in biology, they would tell us that every 7 years your body reproduces itself. So in our developmental cycles, there is essentially 3 7-year periods that happen. The first 7 years of our life, everything is kinetic. We're feeling everything. We're developing physically. We're getting a bearing of our surroundings through touch. The second 7 years is through emotions. We start to develop our identity and our emotional awareness, and we start to get a good experience of all that. The third developmental cycle is the mental. This is when our IQ and our mental faculties really begin to come online. And so these are really critical to understand. Now, what I want to also share with you is that when we are born, as a framework, I want to give you this, is that when you are born with 100 tokens of consciousness, okay? You're born with 100 tokens of consciousness. But like I mentioned, as soon as you're born and you come in, you're given the light of God, but you're also given a wound, a sacred wound. And all of a sudden, the first 7 years, you experience emotional abuse or physical abuse from your caretakers. Our parents didn't know how to take care of us really well, and all of a sudden, we hit an abuse. At that moment in time, we lose consciousness. We literally lose tokens of consciousness. We become fragmented as a result. We lose presence. We lose, vitality because essentially, the soul is this beautiful, innocent energy, and all of a sudden you're being abused, and you just lose consciousness. Then all of a sudden, the second 7 years, your parents get divorced. That's a big one, right? It's like 70-80% of us experience that, and we take it personal. All of a sudden, we no longer have both of our parents in the house, and it's an emotional thing. We lose more tokens of consciousness. So all of a sudden now, we're down to 60. And then in high school, we lose another 10 because we have a terrible heartbreak or an embarrassing moment. Something happens, and we lose more tokens. So now, we're moving around in the world because no one told us the mechanics of consciousness. We're moving around the world with 50 tokens of consciousness. And then we get into business or we get into our life and we run up against a plateau. We run up against a door. We want to do these great things in the world. And we know that we can do it. You see other people that have done it and are doing it, and you say, okay, I can do it. And you go to every seminar, and you learn all the things you need to learn, and you read every single book, and you're doing everything you're being told, and somehow you just keep getting rejected. Somehow you just keep getting rejected. And the reason why you're getting rejected is because that door is saying that you need 80 tokens of consciousness, and you don't got it. You don't have enough presence. And it's not a bad thing. You're not broken. There's no flaw here. Essentially, no one ever told you how this all works. And us as humans, we're very resilient. Just show us the damn direction. We'll make it, because we are social creatures and we want to feel fulfilled. We did not come down into the earth to be mediocre. Just tell us where to go and how to do it. And I mean, look at what we've done as a civilization. It's quite impressive. And ultimately, what is here to share in this specific moment is like, how do I then clean this up, right? How do I go and reclaim the tokens of consciousness? The way you do it is a 4-step process. You have to identify, process, integrate, and evolve. It's the mechanism. So it's pretty straightforward. I get to a door. I get it, Francisco. I need more tokens of consciousness. I got to go back into my own hell and go and reclaim these things. Okay, I got it. How in the heck do I identify what it is that I got to go do? We call it the mirror principle here with Giving Business Soul. What you have to understand is that in your body is what they call God's fingerprint. It's called the divine proportion. It's called the phi ratio, right? It's one of those ratios in math that goes on in forever. We are woven from nature, okay? And so nature works through feedback. Nature is always gathering feedback from the environment. And what she does is she takes all the feedback and then she reiterates herself. She becomes more resilient, becomes a greater expression of herself, right? But it's through the feedback, and it does this every single season. It's always gathering data from the environment. Well, we are no different. We are no different. So where do we get data from? It comes from your relationships. The people that create upset, that stir your emotional waters from them being very simple and straight. It should, your consciousness should be like a still pond, like a lake. So when you are getting somebody that comes into your life, we call them sacred teachers, the Giving Business Soul, and if they piss you off, that's your data. That's your data. Your mom, your dad, your children, your significant other, the ones that stir up all your emotions and you say, damn it, that's where your treasure is. Because what they are doing is essentially they're taking everything that's in your unconscious and they're giving you visibility. So at some point, you will look at them and say, thank you. Thank you for pissing me off, for holding the mirror for me to show myself where I still need love. Because they could be doing the exact same thing to me and it does nothing. But they do it to you and all of a sudden it stirs it up. Why is that? Because there's an energetic tie. They've literally, God sent them to you to say, hey, we need you to become a greater version of yourself, and so we're going to send you this teacher. And as you begin to understand how to apply the frameworks that we give at Giving Business Soul, you'll start to learn how to not only identify where the original trauma is, or also realize where you're doing the exact same thing. I'll give you a quick example. Dang it. The quick example, Trump, 2017. All of 2016, we were doing the North Dakota pipeline. You guys remember the North Dakota pipeline? And the corporation was trying to drill a pipeline through. And we had a standoff for like a year. At the end, it looked like humanity had won. And then all of a sudden, Trump comes into office, and I'm apolitical, but he comes into office, and immediately he comes into office, he puts an executive order, and he pushes that thing through, and it pissed me off. I was like, what? And I said, okay. Use your mirror principle. What is he reminding you of? This is the key. Find out what's the one thing that really pisses you off about that person. Give it language. For me, with Trump, it was that he was insidious. That's what came through for me. Insidious. He does what he wants, whenever he wants, without taking anyone in consideration. So that's what I said about him. That's like when I got down to it, that's the words that came out. So then I said, turn it around. Where am I doing the exact same thing? It's a projection. We live in a hologram where we're literally projecting our own shit onto the screen. Okay? And you always check your projections in 3 areas: with yourself, with God, or with others. So then I ran the framework and I said, okay, where am I being insidious? Oh, shit. I did it right there. I have a company and I just kind of bulldozed my way that time. And I remember they got upset at me and I still did what I wanted. And I saw it everywhere. I was like, oh, I did that with God because I promised that. And yet I just moved over here and forgot my promises and did whatever Shit! It was everywhere. It was everywhere. And so the stuff that pisses you off gives you an opportunity to reconcile. And then I started to address those parts of my own self and use what we teach at Giving Business Soul. So that is the mirror principle. And in the mirror principle, what starts to happen as you begin to clean up, you then begin to grow up. Okay, people can experience very heightened states of waking up, but if they don't clean up, they essentially is still, their ego is still at play. It's called spiritual ego 2.0. If you ever talk to anybody that's really woke, right? But they still have a lot of ego. It's because they haven't dove into their darkness. They haven't gone and cleaned it up, because once you begin to clean it up, you begin to grow up. And when you begin to grow up, you start to form a love not only for yourself, but then for those around you, eventually with the earth, and eventually for all of creation. There are levels to this. And when the deeper you go, like Jesus, the greater your love becomes. And that's really the big key. So it is said that no tree can reach heaven without having its roots firmly in hell. We're all trees here. We all have a seed, and we can ascend to great heights. We just have to be willing to go down into the depths. And what the flow states really help with is that idea of embracing the struggle. It's difficult at first, but at some point you can really begin to gamify it. And once you begin to gamify it and start to realize that the stuff that's happening, it's happening for us, not to us. It's literally God's way of saying, okay, I need you to become great because the earth needs it right now. And you have this code that only you have. It's like you have a very specific song to sing. All of us do. No one here is different from that standpoint. We're all equal in consciousness. We're all given a light. And I believe that when we go down into these depths and we start to clean up, and all of a sudden our vibration changes, I believe that we'll start to sing our song, a very unique song. And it's going to give permission to many others on the planet to do the same thing. And when that happens, I feel like a great symphony will start to overtake the earth, and a new reality will start to emerge. But it will emerge through all of us participating in doing this great work, in applying these frameworks and having the courage to do what all the greats have done.